Do you think the most mysterious places on our planet have already been explored, mapped, and completely explained by modern science? If you believe the era of great geographical discoveries is over, then how would you explain a mountain where simply standing at its base causes a 2-week growth of hair and nails in a matter of just 3 days? And this is not recorded in ancient folklore or local myths, but deeply documented in the classified diaries of Soviet geologists. Or what about a vanished city that once housed hundreds of thousands of people? A city that stands perfectly intact to this very day, with pristine frescoes on its walls, yet holds hundreds of unexplained skeletons hidden deep within its subterranean tunnels. Today, we are going to embark on a journey to one of the most inaccessible and enigmatic locations on Earth. We will examine 8 deeply unexplained phenomena surrounding a single, isolated mountain peak in Western Tibet. We will look at massive rock faces with perfectly vertical grooves that academic geologists cautiously label as atypical morphology, while refusing to investigate further. We will explore 2 neighboring lakes, one pulsing with life, the other completely dead, separated by a thin channel that defies every known law of hydrology. And for our finale, we will delve into a nameless blank spot on Chinese maps, a dead zone where modern instruments fail, and where, in the year 1939, an SS expedition from Nazi Germany and a top-secret 12-man Soviet detachment marched simultaneously. Out of that Soviet team, only 5 returned. What happened to the rest remains highly classified to this day. Welcome to the ultimate mystery of the Himalayas. Let us begin by setting the scene. We are in Western Tibet, roughly 15,000 feet above sea level. At this extreme altitude, the air contains only half the oxygen you would find at the coast. Breathing becomes a conscious effort. The climate here is brutally unforgiving, with winter temperatures plunging to -40 degrees Fahrenheit and summer barely reaching 40 degrees, accompanied by an intense, unfiltered ultraviolet radiation that can literally burn your skin right through your heavy clothing. This is one of the harshest, most desolate, and least populated environments on the habitable portion of our planet. The landscape consists of a few isolated ancient monasteries, scattered nomadic villages, and endless stony plains stretching out toward the horizon. And rising abruptly out of this barren, otherworldly landscape is the mountain. Its height is officially measured at 21,778 feet. It possesses 4 incredibly distinct faces and a sharp, pyramid-like summit reaching into the stratosphere. Strangely, there is not a single glacier on its steep slopes, even though every single neighboring peak in the Himalayan range is heavily covered in ancient, moving ice. Furthermore, there is not a single human footprint above its base camp throughout the entire recorded history of modern observation. 4 major world religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Bon, despite developing completely independently and having little to no direct contact during their early formative centuries, all came to the exact same staggering conclusion about this specific peak. They all revere this mountain as the axis of the world, the cosmic pillar that holds up the heavens. And they strictly forbid anyone from ever climbing it. This is Mount Kailash. And surrounding this forbidden mountain are 8 highly specific anomalies, each patiently waiting for a rational, scientific explanation. Let us start with what is immediately visible, which is also precisely why it is the hardest to explain. Take a look at any typical peak in the Himalayas. You will see jagged ridges, asymmetrical slopes, and random, chaotic topography carved by millions of years of tectonic upheaval and violent weather. Nature does not draw with a ruler, but Mount Kailash is the ultimate exception to this rule. The 4 faces of this mountain deviate from a perfect geometric plane by less than 1%. Its northern face points precisely to the true north, its eastern face exactly to the east. The margin of error in its cardinal orientation is less than 2 degrees. Not a single neighboring peak in the entire massive Himalayan range demonstrates anything even remotely similar to this level of geometric perfection. Academic geologists attempt to explain this through a concept called structural anisotropy of rocks. This is a situation where fractures in a rock mass align strictly in specific directions, and natural weathering merely follows these pre-existing fault lines. It is a very real geological mechanism, but it has a natural mathematical limit. It can occasionally create symmetry on 1, maybe 2 faces of a mountain, but having 4 simultaneously symmetrical planes, oriented precisely to the cardinal points of the compass with an error margin of less than 2 degrees, completely steps outside the boundaries of standard geological textbooks. The renowned Russian ophthalmologist and researcher Ernst Muldashev, who led several expeditions to Kailash in the late 1990s, recorded yet another highly anomalous parameter. He discovered that the angle of inclination of the mountain's faces is practically identical to the angle of inclination of the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. Muldashev also pointed out that the rock on the outer surface of these faces appears visually more uniform and significantly denser than the rock found deep within the mountain's crevices. It looks almost as if the outer shell has a completely different composition, almost like an artificial structural casing. Academic geology has never directly refuted this specific claim. They have simply met it with complete, deafening silence. In 1999, a group of Spanish and Slovak mountaineers actually managed to secure an official permit from the Chinese authorities to climb the mountain. However, the permit was abruptly revoked following a massive, coordinated wave of protests from 4 major religious organizations, groups that had never, under any other circumstances, coordinated their geopolitical actions. What exactly is hidden in the geology of these perfectly oriented faces? There are absolutely no field studies with direct core measurements available in the open domain. The mountain stands silent, and judging by the veil of secrecy, this situation suits certain authorities perfectly well. But the unnatural shape of the mountain is only the surface of the mystery. Literally. Because at the foot of Mount Kailash, something begins to happen to human physiology for which modern biologists still have no definitive answer. Pilgrims who perform the Kora, the ritual walking circuit around the mountain, coming from various historical eras and totally different cultures, all report the exact same terrifying phenomenon. After just a few days of walking the circuit around the base, people experience a drastic, unnatural acceleration in the growth of their hair and nails. This is not some subjective spiritual feeling born of exhaustion. It is a physically measurable, biological result. Those who specifically documented the length of their nails before and after the 3-day trek reported growth equivalent to 2 full weeks of normal biological time. These eyewitness accounts are documented in ancient Tibetan chronicles, in the personal journals of British colonial officers from the 19th century, and in the classified diaries of Soviet geologists from the 1960s. The brilliant Soviet astrophysicist Nikolai Kozyrev, in scientific papers that were highly classified in the USSR, developed a radical concept called the chronal field. Kozyrev controversially argued that time is not a universal constant, but a variable quantity capable of accelerating or decelerating locally, depending on the physical conditions of the surrounding environment, specifically massive geological shapes. While mainstream physics rejected his ideas, his experiments using high-precision gyroscopes in different anomalous zones yielded highly abnormal results that remain unexplained. Biologists naturally prefer a much more cautious hypothesis. They suggest that the severe altitude, extreme UV radiation, and intense physical exertion shock the body into accelerating its metabolism. It is a reasonable working hypothesis, but it completely fails to answer one critical question. Why is this time anomaly not recorded evenly along the entire trekking route? It only occurs in highly specific, localized points around the base of the mountain. It is as if there are unseen loci, focused invisible hotspots, where the localized flow of time physically warps. The answer to why these hotspots exist might be carved directly into the rocks above. You just need to know exactly where to look. On the western and southwestern slopes of Kailash, there are massive rock structures that feature distinctly concave surfaces. These are not random natural niches. They are highly systematic, arranged across multiple elevation levels, sharing incredibly similar angular characteristics. Members of various expeditions have compared them to giant parabolic mirrors, hundreds of feet across, carved directly into the face of the cliff. Ernst Muldashev proposed a fascinating, albeit controversial, theory. He suggested that these colossal stone structures might function to focus ambient energy, whether it be solar, geomagnetic, or acoustic, into highly specific focal points in the valley below. According to his mathematical models, this energy focusing is exactly what creates the localized time anomalies at the foot of the mountain. Official geology offers a standard reply: differential erosion. They claim softer rock erodes faster than harder rock, naturally creating these vast, curved depressions. But the question is not whether erosion exists. The question is why, in this specific location, does it create such an incredibly regular, systematic, and mathematically precise pattern, while the neighboring peaks show absolutely nothing of the sort. Furthermore, Absolutely no one has systematically measured what happens to the electromagnetic or acoustic fields within the focal points of these concave surfaces, simply because no one has ever been granted the government permits to bring in the necessary diagnostic equipment. The colossal stone mirrors continue to stare out over the valley, maintaining a silence they have kept for thousands of years. If the stone mirrors present a question without an answer, the southern wall of Kailash presents something far more tangible and deeply uncomfortable for those who favor conventional science. On the southern face, beginning at an altitude of approximately 16,000 feet, one can clearly trace a series of perfectly vertical grooves. They are remarkably long, perfectly parallel, incredibly uniform in their width, and they run straight down from the upper reaches of the mountain. Viewed from a distance, they look exactly like the unmistakable tracks of gigantic, heavy machinery that has been dragged straight down the side of the cliff. Researchers analyzing high-resolution satellite imagery all resort to using the same deliberately cautious phrase: atypical morphology. Standard geological forces, such as water erosion or glacial movement, produce completely different visual patterns. Water grooves naturally fan out towards the bottom and vary wildly in their width. Glacial striations follow the downward and outward movement of the ice, moving diagonally, never strictly vertically. Yet, on Kailash, these massive grooves are flawlessly vertical. Geologists have noted this bizarre feature since the late 1800s, yet a dedicated field study involving direct rock sampling simply does not exist. Muldashev famously dubbed these formations the Stairway to Heaven, suggesting Kailash is a heavily modified ancient structure. The academic world dismissed this out of hand without any detailed scientific rebuttal. Why has no one drilled, measured, and published the chemical composition of those grooves? Access denied. The grooves remain, and the authorities remain silent. But the mysteries of Kailash are not limited to its immediate slopes. Just 60 miles to the north lies a place that completely shatters our understanding of human history. In the ancient kingdom of Mustang, an isolated mountain enclave, the vertical cliffs are riddled with an astonishing secret. High above the valley floor, at elevations ranging from 150 to nearly 500 feet straight up a sheer rock face, are roughly 10,000 gaping holes. The vast majority are undeniably man-made chambers. They feature meticulously carved walls, structured doorways, and interconnected internal corridors. The absolute impossibility lies in their location. There is absolutely no natural path of ascent, no carved stairs, no natural ledges, just a sheer vertical drop and doors cut into the middle of the sky. When archaeologists finally began working here in the 1990s, they had to be lowered down to the cave entrances, using heavy climbing ropes suspended from helicopters. Inside, they uncovered ancient manuscripts, breathtaking frescoes, and most chillingly, mummified bodies, sitting perfectly preserved in deep meditative postures. Radiocarbon dating on one specific skeleton placed it firmly in the 2nd century BC, roughly 2,300 years ago. This was long before any recognized state officially existed in this desolate region. Who carved 10,000 interconnected rooms into a sheer cliff face at an altitude where modern explorers need helicopters just to access them? And how did the original builders get up and down on a daily basis? There is no answer. And the vast majority of these 10,000 caves have never been unsealed. If the caves of Mustang hid the ancient dead, what lies 60 miles west of Kailash is an entire sprawling metropolis that should not have died. Yet it did. Carved directly into a massive rock formation at an altitude of nearly 12,000 feet stands Tsaparang, the ancient capital of the mighty Guge Kingdom. This was a vast urban center with towering royal palaces, sprawling monasteries, and an endless labyrinth of subterranean galleries. At its peak, it boasted a population of nearly 100,000 people. In 1630, a European missionary described it as wildly wealthy and pulsing with vibrant life. Yet, merely a few decades later, the entire region fell into absolute silence. When modern explorers finally reached the city, they found an eerie ghost town. It was perfectly preserved, but completely abandoned. The magnificent frescoes still glowed on the walls, but deep within the underground military galleries, explorers found hundreds of skeletons, men, women, and young children. Autopsies revealed no trace of a mass plague, and the city showed absolutely no signs of a catastrophic fire. History states that a neighboring kingdom attacked, and the population simply dispersed. But if they dispersed, who exactly was left behind to die in the pitch-black underground tunnels? And why? Tsaparang stands silent to this day. The Chinese authorities refuse to disclose what remains hidden on the lower, unexplored levels. 100,000 people thrived here, and not a single descendant remains to tell us what truly wiped them out. While the dead city is a ghost of the past, at the very southern foot of Mount Kailash, nature is currently conducting a real-time experiment that defies every known law of hydrodynamics. Lying side by side, separated only by an incredibly narrow strip of land, are two massive lakes. They share the exact same elevation, the same climate, and the same geological bed. Yet, they are absolute opposites. Lake Manasarovar is crystal clear fresh water, teeming with life, and glows with a brilliant blue. Ancient Tibetan texts refer to it as the Lake of Life, possessing waters that heal. Just a few feet away lies its dark twin, Rakshastal. This lake is heavily salt water, incredibly dark, and practically devoid of any birds, fish, or visible life forms. The locals call it the Lake of Demons. There is no open-source hydrological explanation for how two connected lakes can develop diametrically opposed chemical compositions. Even more bizarrely, there is a natural connecting channel between the two. Historically, when water from the living lake naturally overflowed into the dead lake, ancient Tibetan scrolls considered this event to be a massive cosmic omen, signaling an era of unprecedented global upheaval. Life and death, sitting side by side, perfectly mirroring each other, while Kailash towers above. If the lakes refuse to yield their secrets, there is a location just to the northwest of Kailash where the questions simply stop. Not because we have found the answers, but because our technology physically ceases to function. Northwest of the mountain lies a heavily guarded zone that Tibetans call the Black Peak area. On publicly accessible Chinese maps, this area is simply a white, censored rectangle. Explorers who have attempted to infiltrate this zone report the exact same terrifying phenomenon. Analog compasses begin to spin wildly. GPS devices instantly freeze or display coordinates that are hundreds of miles away. Mechanical watches begin to lag significantly, losing measurable amounts of time after just a few hours inside the zone, only to return to their normal rhythm the moment you step out. During the Cold War, classified Soviet geophysical programs discovered immense, highly structured anomalies in the Earth's geomagnetic field here. Curiously, the epicenter was not Mount Kailash itself, but a highly specific, seemingly empty point in the space nearby. A surviving Soviet geophysicist later stated in an interview, "We were ordered to pack up our equipment. We were told that this specific issue had already been resolved at a level far above our understanding." Which brings us to the most chilling historical footnote of all. The year is 1939. Europe is teetering on the absolute brink of the Second World War. Hitler is secretly preparing for the invasion of Poland. Yet, at this exact critical moment in global history, two highly secretive, heavily armed expeditions are marching toward Mount Kailash. They are completely unaware of each other. The first is a German expedition funded by the Anomaly, the elite occult research branch of Heinrich Himmler's SS. Simultaneously, a 12-man detachment of elite Soviet operatives is making its way to the exact same coordinates. The German SS team eventually returned to Berlin completely intact, bringing back massive crates of classified artifacts. The Soviet team was not so lucky. Out of the 12 highly trained men who went in, only 5 returned. 7 of them simply vanished into the Himalayas, officially listed as missing in action. What exactly were the two most powerful and ruthless superpowers on Earth desperately searching for at the base of this specific mountain in the exact same year, right before a global war? The open archives offer no answers. Today, Mount Kailash stands exactly as it did 3,000 years ago. 4 perfectly aligned geometric faces, a sharp, unclimbed summit, and not a single human footprint defiling its slopes. Every single year, thousands of devout pilgrims endure unimaginable physical hardships to walk the circuit around its base. Yet not a single one of them ever attempts to step foot onto the mountain itself. This is because this place possesses a boundary, an invisible, unwritten law that is deeply ingrained in the human psyche. It is a boundary that has held stronger than any international treaty, and more securely than any standing army, for over 5,000 continuous years. So, I turn the question to you. Out of the 8 incredible anomalies we explored today, from the time-warping chronal fields to the vanished city of Tsaparang, which one fundamentally challenges your understanding of reality the most? Drop a number in the comments below. I am incredibly curious to see what caught your attention. If this deep dive opened your eyes to a corner of the world they never taught you about in school, hit that like button. It is the absolute best way to let me know that we should keep exposing these forgotten mysteries. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because in our next video, we are heading to a location that makes Kailash look like an open book. See you next time.